correct. 100%.
Now, why did you start this before Sidney Powell even talked about it, before President Trump even talked about it? How did you know that to even start with this Dominion software?
Well, interesting story. In 2018, the Dallas election, Dallas, Texas, had some irregularities in it. Irregularities such as we are now seeing in our national election. The state government of Texas, the governor formed a blue chip panel to dig into it, and they hired a cybersecurity group, ex-military intelligence and federal law enforcement types, and cyber experts and so forth. And they studied it for 2 years. So it was run on Dominion equipment, and they basically had 2 years to figure out what the rest of America has been trying to understand in the last 2 weeks. And they had come up with, they discovered there's about a dozen ways to cheat an election being run on Dominion or other systems. And I was aware, I believed, and the backstory for this is too long to tell here, but I knew that in July or August that they were going to try to do this election. And I fell in with that group, actually another cyber group, and that group, and then we started. I don't even like to think of myself as hiring these people. It's more like we're all fellow travelers. They were all on the same path. I started just funding it so everyone could do this and not worrying about their mortgages and such. But I think of them as the bad news bears, and I'm the team coach. They don't work for the team coach. They're their own people, and they're quite eccentric and colorful and interesting people. It'll make a great movie someday. And
would they be experts? Is it fair to say they would be experts in uncovering fraud?
Yes, experts in uncovering fraud, cybersecurity, uncovering hacking. They were white hat hackers. Most of them are white hat hackers. There's some legal people involved and national security people involved. So, so they're experts in I think of it as reverse engineering. When the United States or Israel comes out with a new product and it's a great product, they take it over to China and they break it apart and they figure out how it was done, and so they can copy it. That's reverse engineering. These folks reverse engineered how you cheat an election using Dominion equipment.
Now, I've been reading that Dominion, the origin of it, was to control elections in Venezuela. Hugo Chavez actually originated. And so was the original intent of Dominion software to steal an election?
Yes, although, there's a lot of dancing around this. Let me be more precise. Some Venezuelan engineers developed something called Smartmatic in Venezuela. They then moved and opened a company in Florida with that name. In like 2003, Smartmatic changed its name to Sequoia. Somewhere along the line, they licensed software to different people, election people in the industry here. But there were hundreds of Venezuelans around the United States teaching how this could be implemented. And then through this complicated series of corporate mergers and acquisitions and divestments and licensing deals, it ended up in ESS and Dominion and maybe some others. So you could say that the DNA of the software goes back to Hugo Chavez. The DNA goes back. And now it has functionality that you would find quite curious. It has functionality that might be appropriate for a corporate election. So remember, these systems are used in corporate elections too. And so it has functionality that you might imagine in a corporate election or in a parliamentary election, which has ranking of candidates and different things. But that functionality is in the machines that they're using in the United States. And it's my allegation that the administrators, one of the ways these get cheated is if the administrators use that kind of functionality to bend an election, a political election. So for example, a corporate election, there are different classes of stock, and one class may have 10 votes for every share of common stock. So the election, a corporate election software has to be able to adjust for that. Well, have that functionality. Well, that has no place in one of our democratic elections because my vote's the same as your vote. However, that functionality is in the machine, and it's available for the administrators to use to shave points away from one person and to the other person.
Now, I want to jump somewhere else. You have made the statement that if we don't correct our whole election system, our country is doomed. And I'll go a step further, although I think I heard you say this too. In a couple of weeks or so, if they confirm that Biden is president, all of this stuff will be poured in cement, so to speak, and there will never be an investigation, and we will never have a fair election again. Is that a fair statement?
That's a fair statement. I think we will never have a fair election again. I've lived in really crummy places in the world, including I spent a little over a year in China, 83, 84. I'm very familiar. And anyway, I think that this will be the last. I think that this is a soft coup. What we're seeing is a slow coup. And the different pieces of it are not. I've learned that, how do you get someone to eat an elephant? One bite at a time. I'm just giving one bite now that this election is fraudulent, but actually what we're experiencing, I think, is a slow coup. If this isn't done, I mean, look what's happened in this country in the last 6 months, setting aside, I guess including COVID. All kinds of constitutional norms have been shredded, really in the last couple of years. Respect for free speech, respect for the rights of the accused, respect for religious liberty. And it's just being shredded in front of our eyes, and the shredding has become normalized.
And you know what's so amazing? In the past, this would take decades to have a little thing happen. Now it's like we're on fast forward.
Well, it's like Rahm Emanuel said, don't let a good crisis go to waste. They're not letting the crisis of COVID go to waste.
Okay, Patrick, you said something else that was amazing to me that your experts found out. They found out if they could get 5 counties, so to speak, or regions in the United States, they could control 5 states. If they could control 5 states, they can control the election. What were those 5 states?
Let me make it 6, and actually think of it as 5 counties. The counties containing Atlanta, Georgia, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Detroit, Michigan, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Maricopa, Arizona, which is basically Greater Phoenix, and then Greater Las Vegas, which is called Clark County, Nevada. If you don't have to steal and cheat across the country, but you have to steal like crazy in those 6 places. And if you flip them, you flip those 6 states: Nevada, Arizona, Wisconsin, Philly, Michigan, and Atlanta, and Georgia, and that far and away steals the Electoral College. And that's what they did. And those happen to be the places, if you've been following the news and you hear on election night, remember there were whole voting operations shut down for 3 hours because of a water main break in the middle of the night, things like this. Those happen to be the places where those oddities, those irregular, and I've never heard of that in my lifetime. In the middle of election night, you're shutting down a voting place and kicking everyone out with all the... And those are the places that they had to steal are the ones where those water mains broke. And what do you know? When people were kicked out for 3 hours, suddenly machines were processing 3 or 4 times as many ballots as they could process, and you had these enormous spikes. And what do you know? 99.4% of 600,000 votes come in and get counted. And what do you know? 99.4 are for Joe Biden. So it's things like that.
Well, it seems to me, and I'm just, a plain person, but all we have to do is have a brand new election in those 6 regions, not the whole United States, and we can have the truth come out. Is that a possibility that would work?
Well, there's different, there's recounts and there's revotes. What you're describing is a revote.
Yes.
A judge will order a recount when they have identified fraud or errors and they can strip those out. But if the thing gets so scrambled, it's like an egg you can't unscramble, a scrambled egg. If it gets so scrambled you can't unscramble, they order a revote. There's no provision in the Constitution for a revote, and there is a provision that if by January 6th this is not all sorted out, then this alternative process kicks in. So I don't think they can actually do a revote.
Could the Supreme Court demand it, so to speak?
They would be violating the Constitution.
Okay.
Although I think in my perfect world, it would be in those 6 states, you'd have a revote and you'd watch everything very carefully. you can't, I don't think that they can do that and get it done before January 6th. So that means the House is going to meet on January 6th. And there's a couple different things that can happen. I don't see there's any way. If they let these votes stand as they are, there will never be election law in the United States if they turn a blind eye to this. So
well, wait a second. If we go on what I hear you saying, the easier one is the recount rather than the revote.
Yeah, but
would Trump win on a recount?
Well, the recounts, you could recount.
Just in those 6 regions now.
Yes, take Nevada. They're claiming that they found, I think, 40,000 dead people voted, or people voted twice, something like that in Nevada. If you can strip that out and a few select things, 17,000 dead people and things like that, that may change it. So that's the recount. I don't know if that's enough to really change the whole thing. I don't think they can get that done, because a bunch of the places a recount doesn't matter, because the ballots have been tampered with, the ballots have no provenance, the ballots have been run through Dominion readers. And here's something people don't understand. The Dominion readers, so-called readers, actually have little printers in them, and they can print votes.
Excuse me, for non-computer people, what is a reader?
A reader is the machine that you feed the ballots into. After people have voted, you feed the ballot in, and the machine reads who you voted for. Well, it turns out that those not only read, but they can actually print. And they have a library inside the machine, which they advertise in their literature to election officials, that library of prints doesn't have to print perfectly. You can make, which you could tell it was a machine, it can print like a human did it. So there's little scratches and things that aren't perfect. So the machines have the ability to make ballots look like they were filled out by a human when they weren't, that starts getting a little odd to have that functionality, that they would have a library of human-like checks. And because the machines could have been hacked, and certainly these ballots have all been fed through machines, it would suggest to me that you can't really do revotes. Some of the revotes will pick up, or recounts will pick up some things. They'll be able to exclude dead people who voted. They'll be able to exclude people who voted twice. I don't think they can recount the ballots everywhere and get the truth, because the ballots have been altered, or even the provenance of the ballots. They were supposed to keep the envelope with the signature next to the ballot, and they separate those. Things like that kind of make it.
So what can be done?
Boy, the people behind this were very clever, and they created a very thorny issue.
I'll just interject. The spirits behind the people behind it, the demons, if you will, were pretty bright. But we have someone brighter working for us.
Oh, yeah?
It's called God and the angels.
From your lips to God's ear, Sid. From your lips to God's ear. Well, I'm no angel, but I have a devious mind. I think so I think we know we have reverse engineered what they did. They're very clever, and that they created a situation that's very difficult for a court to unscramble. Probably impossible. The Supreme Court, this is going to get to the Supreme Court. If the Supreme Court lets this stuff stand, like the Pennsylvania election officials, in my view, and pardon me for being a bit earthy, they gave the finger to the United States Supreme Court, to Judge Alito, because before the election, Judge Alito said, you really should, the Constitution is quite clear. State legislatures set the rules for election. However, in the days leading up to the elections, in a number of states, election officials changed the rules without state legislatures buying off. That's wildly unconstitutional. Judge Alito and the Supreme Court should have enjoined them from doing that in Pennsylvania. He did not enjoin them. So one of the rules was you only count the ballots if they're postmarked by Election Day, or I think if they come in by Election Day. Pennsylvania said, we're going to change that rule. I think that Alito should have enjoined them. He didn't stop them with a legal order, but he did stipulate, you can go ahead and do it this way. We'll sort it out afterwards, but you have to keep the ballots segregated that came in after the date that your legislature approved, and we'll address it then if it makes a difference. Well, Pennsylvania just ignored that rule. They not only accepted the ballots, they deliberately separated. They did not segregate them. So now it'd be impossible to unwind. So that was giving the finger to a U.S. Supreme Court justice. And pardon my earthiness, but we should understand this was scofflaw behavior. They violated the Constitution, and when a Supreme Court justice gave them one instruction, they violated that. So,
okay, so that, let's just say, for the sake of discussion, that one state is taken to the Supreme Court based on what they see there and see in a number of other states. What is the best we could get from the Supreme Court?
The best would be to say, you know what, since you polluted your ballots of mail-in ballots, you got to throw all of them out. To which the other side will say, wait, you are taking away the votes from millions of people, to which the correct answer is no. You sons of guns who polluted those votes against our Supreme Court orders with hundreds of 600,000 or something of these ballots that came, I forget how many hundreds of thousands that came in late, because you polluted that pool, you guys destroyed their vote. That's what they should say. Strict justice, that's how they should treat it.
Okay, so if that occurs, what is the result?
Then you'd be throwing out over 1 million, couple million, I suppose, mail-in ballots in Pennsylvania, which were overwhelmingly for Biden, and Trump would win by 500,000 or 1 million votes. However, the answer to that is no, by doing that, you're disenfranchising the 2 million people who sent in ballots who did send in ballots, to which my answer would be, no, we're not disenfranchising. You disenfranchised by polluting them with these ballots. We told you not to pollute. But so that'll be the argument. The best thing that would happen is the Supreme Court stands tall and says, listen, this is the Constitution, this is the order, you violate it, strict justice. Everything that you polluted by doing this gets thrown out, in which case it's a landslide for Trump would be revealed. And by the way...
Okay, but that's what I see. I want you to know. So I just want to know how it could be done. You gave me the answer. You gave me the answer.
Done, but what the Supreme Court will do instead, I mean, that would be really...
No. I am going for the gold. Okay. I'm going for the gold. I don't want to know what they're going to do instead, because they're not going to do it instead.
If you really are on principle, you really have to say, if the Supreme Court lets stand the behavior that a bunch of these states did in the days leading up to the election, election officials changing rule and thumbing their nose at the legislature, if they let that stand, then I would say there is no election law in America. From then on, every state election official is going to cheat as he wants.
It's the Wild West again.
Yeah, because, the Supreme Court showed they turn a blind eye, and so you could never enforce it again. So I think they should be strict and throw out everything that got tainted by this goon behavior. If they don't do that, though, there's another thing done in the Constitution. Our founding fathers knew that elections, this kind of goon behavior can happen. So they set up an alternative process, a number of alternative fallbacks. And at some point, the Supreme Court's going to say, you shouldn't have done that, but it's too extreme a remedy to just throw out 2 million or 7 million mail-in ballots. So we're going to just go to the fallback. And the fallback is, first of all, the state legislatures, what they can say, look, we in Pennsylvania, Michigan, they can and should say, we see how badly this was done. We see that the state election officials violated our laws. And so we're just going to, we legislatures have the right to direct who gets the electoral votes, and we're just going to give them to who we think would have won without your goon behavior. If that doesn't work, the whole thing goes to the House of Representatives, and there's a special kind of election there. So those are the fallbacks.
Okay, I believe, and I don't know how, that's why I'm interviewing you to find out perhaps how. I believe that Trump will get his second term. And I'm trying to put the puzzle together, the reverse thing you were talking about. I'm trying to figure that out with that known fact, working that way. I know how to handle it spiritually. What can our people viewing right now do practically to help?
Well, actually, you can do something quite important. There's a woman who's become prominent in the last month who's been doing this on her own dime. And her name is Sidney Powell. She has a website called defendingtherepublic.org, defendingtherepublic.org. Go there. If everyone listening went and chipped in $5, this problem could be over. Oh, Trump absolutely can win. In fact, I find it inconceivable that everything goes, that Biden gets seated through any normal process now. If it goes to the House and he gets seated in these alternative processes, I did not vote for Mr. Trump. I'm not a Trump supporter. I'm a libertarian. I'm doing this.
So why are you fighting so hard?
Full principle. I love the Constitution. To me, my religion is the U.S. Constitution. I would be doing this if it were Barack Obama had been cheated, if Ronald Reagan had been cheated, if anyone had been cheated, I'd be doing exactly what I'm doing.
Yeah, are you sure you're not Jewish? We Jews have this sense of fairness.
I know. Well, I'm Irish. And Irish, I'm not sure we have the exact same sense of fairness, but we have a sense of, you know, the joke about what's Irish Alzheimer's? It's when you forget everything but your grudges. You know? I think that if this stands, we're going to turn into Paraguay or something. It's the end of the U.S. as we know it.
It's not going to be the end of the U.S. I think God's not finished with us. I know God's not finished with us. I believe God is using you because you had the foresight to do this research just at the most pivotal moment in the world. How can we get some of the information you have uncovered? Because you have blockbusters that the attorneys don't want to even release, so the public doesn't know what's really going on.
You know, I've written something. I have a website I've had for 13 years called Deep Capture, where I write about corruption. And it won various awards in 2008 as the best writing on corruption in America. It was dormant for almost a decade. I reactivated it when I started taking this on. So you can read the details and the facts. Anyone who tells you there's no evidence, go to Deep Capture, and right at the top, there's an essay, the 2020 election was rigged, the evidence. I'm also tweeting out things, so there's social media and such. I'm doing interviews and tweeting them. So the more we can do, the mainstream, there's the mainstream, then let's say the alternative, but that's kind of respectable alternative. And then there's the really fringe. And finally, because I was giving all this to the mainstream weeks ago, and they were shutting me down, wouldn't even listen to the evidence or anything. So we've been working our way in. We're doing more and more shows. Now we've gone from doing shows with 3,000 listeners and 10,000 to now a good show like yours with millions. And I think it's only a matter of days before we force them, especially if what people do is they tweet these shows or they send them to reporters at mainstream press to let them know you're watching, and they can't just block it forever. Let the mainstream know, and they will force having us on, which will let the conversation evolve.
Out of curiosity, all I know about Sidney Powell is what I read in the newspapers, and I have to tell you intuitively, I happen to like that woman. Yes. And like what she's doing. However, did you supply her with any of the research that your Bad News Bears came up with? That was the group that was assembled to find fraud.
You can be sure that everything that for 3 weeks we've been pumping everything we could find, both to the mainstream media and to the President Trump's orbit. And frankly, that includes both Sidney's side and Mayor Giuliani's side. However, I don't want to take any credit. I'm a concerned citizen. I'm not connected to either of them. And Sidney especially had really sussed out what had happened. We showed up with some missing pieces of the puzzle, but she had the puzzle roughly assembled.